Hi, in this video I'm going to tell you about how you can reduce New Year's anxiety. I'm Orla Kirby, I'm a therapist and I specialise in helping people to move away from severe anxiety and or OCD. So for a lot of people it can be quite an anxious time, right? And that would apply to a really wide range of people, or it could be a time that will bring up, a heaviness or a sense of anxiety or foreboding, and that wouldn't be just people who have a difficult relationship with anxiety anyway, right? A bit like people can get difficult or challenging feelings on their birthdays. Often it's quite common for people to feel a sense of, I didn't get that stuff done this year that I wanted to, or, I'm still in this place this year. I thought I would have changed this by now, or, and people can feel that on their birthday. People can also feel that at New Year's, right? And there can be other reasons too, right? There might be certain associations with this time of year, that make it difficult for you too. And then there can be a lot of pressure to kind of change everything, or, there's a lot of talk about, making yourself into a better person, or, what are your goals? And sometimes, particularly if you're already feeling stressed or anxious or low, that can feel like a lot of pressure. So, I think this affects a really wide range of people. And then if you are someone where you are already struggling with anxiety or OCD, then, this is altogether more difficult again, right? Perhaps not for everyone, but for a large proportion of people with severe anxiety or OCD, then it's going to be even more difficult, right? Because you are dealing with these sort of general challenges on top of a challenge you already have. So that's why I'm making this video, to just give some ideas for simple things you can do to shift yourself away from that to an extent, right? And any of these will help. Used in combination, they will be extremely helpful. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to suggest, if you're feeling a sense of anxiety or dread about, in some way connected with New Year's, right? So it could be anxiety in terms of like, I haven't got this stuff done yet, or it could be anxiety about next year in some way, some kind of New Year's link. I think a really great idea would be to write down all the things you are proud of, right, about last year. So this is a really great question to ask yourself. What am I proud of? And you could ask this more specifically. You could think about October. Think, okay, I'm going to overview October. What am I proud of about the way that I acted in October? Yeah, and even if it seems like a challenge, like really push yourself to find something. Even if there was, some really difficult situations in that month, what am I proud of about how I handled that or how I reacted to that, right? And just go through the different months and find something, try to find one in each month. What am I proud of? You might find loads more than that. So that is something that I would advise, right, is going through the year, finding things that you're proud about. Yeah, and they can be big things, they can be small things. There's no rules here, right? I think something just fell over in the other room. Sorry, nothing dramatic has happened. I think an umbrella just fell over. Okay. Now the next thing I would talk about is perhaps thinking about how change can be really beautifully slow. Okay, so the slowness of change can be very reassuring when you're feeling like, I haven't gotten far enough, I haven't done well enough, whether that's like in life or in terms of stuff to do with mental health, or, when it comes to relationships or work, or, it might be one bit of your life where you're feeling this way, or it might be all of life, or, anything in between. So if you are feeling that sense of, I haven't got far enough, or I haven't done what I've wanted, or, I'm too old to start this, or I haven't got where I want to get this year. If you're feeling any of those things, what's really helpful is to think, it's okay for things to be slow, and almost to really sit with and embrace a sense of slowness, to kind of celebrate slowness, right? And to think, change can be gradual. I can see ways in which I've been, moving towards change in the past year, over the past 10 years. I can see these signs, right? And again, they might be big signs, they might be small signs of a shift in a really great direction, right? I can see that I tried hard at this here. I can see that this was a good idea there. Maybe I took some backward steps there, but I can also see that this was a really excellent decision I made here, right? And to see it as a gradual, that if you have a direction you want to be headed in, it's okay. It's okay for that to take time, right? And that often change is gradual for lots of people, right? And that sometimes it can be easier to maintain a gradual change, right? Because we are kind of acclimatizing to the change as we make it. So we're not necessarily going to get as much pushback then on the change, right? Because for our kind of early lizard brain or chimp brain, a lot of change all at once can be quite threatening, quite frightening, and we can then get a lot of pushback from our unconscious mind. So there are arguments in favor of incremental change, right? Making a little change, a little change, a little change. So not only can that make you feel differently about last year and the last decade and so on, it can make you feel better about what's coming next week and next month and next year, because you can kind of say to yourself, I don't have to change it all at once, right? I can take these small steps, these little steps, and actually there's an advantage to that, right? There's a strength to that. It's going to be easier to maintain that if I'm changing a little bit, changing a little bit, changing a little bit. So that can be very reassuring, and really, really beautiful to think about the idea of slowness, right? And to think of time itself as something slow. This is also very helpful when, there's a lot of time distortion hypnosis work around this, where you can think about time as passing slowly. So you can kind of decide, for the next 10 minutes, each minute is going to feel like 5 minutes. And that sounds almost overly simple to work, right? But if you really learn how to put yourself into a deeply relaxed state, and you say this to yourself, you actually can deliberately step into a really different sense of time, right? And even thinking of time being slow, like thinking of a really old grandfather clock ticking and ticking, over the years, over hundreds of years, that can allow you to step into a really different sense of time, of how you're describing time to yourself. Or thinking about a sundial, right, that's ancient. and that shadow is moving very gradually around. That's going to give you a really different sense of time to like a ticking clock, where it feels like it's going very fast. So slowness, contemplating slowness can be really helpful, I think. The next thing, interesting, that I'm going to talk about, this is going to sound like a complete contradiction, but the next thing that I'm going to talk about is speed, right? And how actually change can be fast, right? So I know that sounds like a contradiction, but bear with me. So change can be fast. Change with our mental health, change with anything else can sometimes be fast, right? So, not necessarily change as in from, when it comes to mental health, probably change isn't going to be fast from, a very, very high level of distress to completely fine, right? That would be very strange if that happened. Or from, very, very depressed or very, very anxious to full mental health, instantaneously. That's not what I'm talking about here, right? It's more that it can be faster than we think, right? Or faster than we believe we ought to allow it to be, right? So sometimes we can be almost believing that getting better has to be hard, right? Or that healing or improvement in health, whether physical or mental, has to be difficult, like that there always ought to be a struggle, right? I'm not saying there never is, but there's no rule that there has to be, right? And actually getting better can be enjoyable. Huge parts of it can be enjoyable, can feel lovely. Huge amounts of it can feel lovely, even if there are parts that feel challenging. And, sometimes this feeling that it has to be hard, it has to take a lot of time and a lot of effort, can come from almost like a moralistic sense that we oughtn't to be enjoying ourselves, right? Or that we, that things that are good ought to be hard. It's kind of like eat your vegetables kind of approach, right? So just to be aware that could be going on in our minds when we think about how long it might take us to do something or to get where we want to be. And sometimes it can feel like a bit of a relief to think, I could allow this to be a bit faster if I wanted, maybe. Or what would it be like if I imagined this happening reasonably quickly, or a bit quicker than I am imagining it now, right? Particularly if you're feeling like it's going to take 100 years to sort this out, right? Or, there's so many issues for me to go through in therapy. I'd have to be in therapy for 40 years. You know, you just might never start therapy, right? So, and it's not necessarily, you know, so this is important, right? It's it's not necessarily going to take you the amount of time, for example, that you took to accumulate problems or issues or difficult patterns in your brain. Yeah, if you've spent 30, 40, 50 years, you know, unfortunately, like establishing certain patterns in your brain that are unhelpful. And of course, that may also be influenced by environment, by other people. But, you know, nevertheless, if that stuff has been established, it's not necessarily going to take, you know, the same amount of time to unpick that, to undo that. Not at all, right? It can be much, much faster. And it's not necessarily like a kind of steady rate of progress with this kind of thing, right? So sometimes someone might be in therapy for 3 months, say, and think, wow, I mean, I've seen a little bit of improvement, but, you know, if this is the rate of improvement, like, I might have to be in therapy for a really long time, you know, maybe for 3 years, maybe for 5 years, maybe for 10 years. And it's not necessarily like that, because like with any learning process or development process, you know, that you get upturns and then you get plateaus, right? And you get an upturn and you get a plateau. So you can have really steep kind of rises where you have kind of light bulb moments, or things fit into place, or you just gradually have built up enough momentum that then things all kind of fit very quickly, and you find it easy. You find it easy for a while, and it feels like you're, you know, really growing and expanding in your sense of things. You know, and that can be amazing, and it can be very fast, right? And there are also certain processes that you can use and learn, you know, in terms of the things that I'm trained in. It's the kind of NLP side of things, the neuro-linguistic programming, that has more of a focus on speed, right? So this is why I come at this from 2 points of view, because solution-focused intertherapy has lots of emphasis on slowness and incremental change, which I think can be a great approach. And NLP has got a lot of focus on speed, right? Like, change now, you can change now. You know, lose your sense of having to be slow, like, you know, let's do it now. I think particularly if that works, if you find that inspiring, if the idea of it taking a long time kind of puts you off, you know, it's possible to work in it kind of connected with the energy of speed, right? It's possible to frame things that way to yourself. Imagine if I could change this really quickly. Imagine if it was easy to change this. What would I do if I knew that it would be easy to solve this problem? What would I do if tomorrow I woke up and the problem just wasn't there, right? It can be very useful to think about speed, and to imagine things falling away or quickly shifting, simply for what that does to our mind, right? What that does to our brain. And again, I'm not saying that I think it's simple or easy, you know, for everyone to sort out their mental health problems. That's not what I'm saying. It's more about metaphor and approach, right? That to at least bear in mind that some of our sense of something having to take a long time could be more from a kind of social sense of things, that things ought to be hard or things ought to be difficult, right? And like, just let's not make things any more difficult than they have to be, right? I think, yeah, like approaching with a sense of, oh, you know, excitement about change, right? And that it can be fast. That if you really shift your beliefs, that unpacks so many other things that you can make fast, powerful progress, right? And also that speed in terms of changing stuff to do with your mind. And I realise I'm talking more about changing stuff with your mind. You may want to change other things in your life, right? This is just what I know more about. But in terms of changing stuff with your mind, the more that you put into it, the faster results you will see, right? And I really see this with my clients. It's a lot about what you do in between sessions, right? In any kind of therapy, and perhaps particularly in therapy that involves hypnosis, because it takes practice, right? You have to practice the slow breathing, to practice listening to your audio track, you need to practice using hypnosis throughout the day to shift your emotional state. And all of that takes work and practice, right? And people who really lean into that and give that some time, give that some energy, those are the ones who see faster, quicker progress, right? And that's true for a lot of things, as I'm sure it's just kind of logical, right? That just makes sense. So there are things we can do to speed up our progress. And I think what can be helpful is to be kind of to see it as not like hurrying ourselves along or being like, come on, be quicker, but more just like allowing ourselves to experience quickness. They're going to contemplate quickness and speed and lightness. And think, oh, yeah, I'm going to allow myself some speed and some grace. I'm going to just allow myself some quickness today. Could be a really helpful kind of thought process to have. Okay, so then the next thing I'm going to talk about here in terms of moving away from New Year's anxiety is acceptance and letting go. So there might be some things we could do some work accepting, right, about the year before, about 2021, or about the last 10 years, the last 20 years, maybe. Because, of course, this time of year can bring up feelings about decades of time, right? And yeah, there's no easy way to do this. But it is really, really powerful. If you can manage even an extended event, you don't have to forgive everything or accept everything, right? For this to make a difference, even just feeling a little bit more okay, a little bit more accepting about one thing is going to really help, you know? So if there was something you really wanted to make progress with and you feel like you've made no progress, or even that you've gone backwards, you know, it may help to talk to someone about that, to express that feeling. Oh, I really didn't get as far with X thing as I wanted to, you know, and I'm feeling sad about that. Right, that may be helpful. Sounds very simple, but it might be helpful to really write down about it, right? You know, I'm frustrated about this, or I'm feeling a bit stuck with this, or, you know, last year I thought I would do this and I haven't done this. You know, would just write all that stuff out, right? And then, importantly, imagine that you are sending up the chimney, right? Or it's burning up in a fire, going up the chimney, and the ashes are floating off into the sky, getting smaller and smaller, smaller and smaller, till you can hardly see them. Or some other process like that, where you're imagining this, these words you've written kind of drifting away from you, right? And you're kind of deliberately putting yourself into an attitude of surrender, release, letting go, yeah? And it's a question of extent. I'm not saying, you know, it's possible for anyone to do this perfectly or wholly or entirely. You know, it's more about just shifting, nudging yourself into being a little more accepting, a little more letting go of this stuff, right? Okay, now the next thing I'm going to talk about is connecting with yourself. Now, this is a really complex one, so I might make a whole other video or series of videos on this, right? But really, really, this is a great time of year, kind of the winter generally, for really connecting inward. We more naturally go inward anyway, right? And in winter, we tend to be, well, maybe not everyone, but we tend generally to be more social in summer and kind of go a bit more inward in winter generally, partly just because of the weather. But there's kind of a natural rhythm to that too, right? So this is a great time of year, the winter, for really going inward and connecting with ourselves. And there are a number of ways to do this through therapy, and also things you can do by yourself. And as I say, I think I may make a whole other video about this. I'm also running a workshop in this, on this in January, so I'll put the details to that in the description. But working out what makes me happy, what do I love doing, what really lights me up as a person, what's great for me, what am I excited about, what was I excited about when I was a child, what do I love doing, what could I do for hours and hours and not get bored of it, where have I experienced really intense joy in my life, and could I really write in detail about 3 of those times, right? Also, what's important to me, what are my values, and you know, what's important to me, just keep writing. Write as much as you can. What's important to me? What's really important to me? And notice what comes up again and again. Do you write the same thing a few times? Because that might be significant. And also asking, you know, how do I connect with my intuition? And again, this is a complex one. I might write a whole video on just this. But how do I connect myself with my gut instinct, with my sense of, you know, what is it that I feel or I think or I do when I'm getting a strong kind of gut instinct? Or what decisions have I made where I acted on instinct, wasn't like a clear logical reason, but I just did it because it seemed like the right thing, and then it did turn out pretty well. Like, I do think that was the right decision. What was I doing then? Kind of try to put yourself back into that state. What was I doing to connect with that intuition? And something you can do as well is put yourself into a relaxed state. So you can use deep breathing or hypnosis for this. And if you want a guide to that, you can go to orlakirby.com/learn to meditate. You can use my guide there. Just a lot of videos and audios to teach you how to use hypnosis and meditation. So you can put yourself to a relaxed state. And then you can ask yourself, where do I feel intuition in my body, right? And this is going to be different for different people. So some people feel it in their heart, it's quite a common one. Some people feel it in their, like actually in their gut, right? So like a gut instinct. It's quite powerful, that phrase. Some people feel it actually in their guts or in their stomach. Some people feel it on their shoulders, right? Or around or in their shoulders. I've had one person who felt it on the soles of their feet. That's kind of amazing, isn't it? So it really could be any part of your body. So you're just asking yourself gently, kind of waiting. Like if you don't feel anything, just wait for that answer. And you know, I'm not saying this is a metaphorical thing, right? I'm not saying there literally is something in the soles of your feet. It's more just how do you connect with your unconscious mind, right? That's what we're asking here. And how do you symbolically represent that to yourself? And then once you have that answer, so say it is your heart, right? Then you just ask your heart a simple question, right? And this is a way to connect with your intuition. What does your heart say back? What do the soles of your feet say back? It's very different to just pro and conning something, right? Brings in more of you. Yeah, so all of those are some ideas towards connecting with yourself. And why is connecting with yourself helpful? Because when we get very anxious, we tend to become more and more distant from ourselves, right? And we can have quite a strange sense of ourselves, or like, who am I? Or like, you know, I feel like I'm not being myself, but I'm not sure how to be myself. Or, you know, we can get that sense that people will see through us. Or, you know, our sense of self is often quite tricky to access, right? And it's a little bit chicken and egg. The two of them lead to each other, because of course if I'm then feeling like, oh, who am I really, and I don't feel like I can be myself, that then leads to more anxiety and so on, right? So having actual ways, like actual methods you can use to connect with yourself deeply, and then repeating that again and again, can be so helpful for moving away from any kind of anxiety. And I guess maybe particularly around this kind of New Year's anxiety, because the New Year's anxiety that most people have is going to be very connected with themselves, right? It's not so much that kind of anxiety, although of course you may be also experiencing simultaneously other kinds of anxiety, but it's not so much this sort of anxiety about what's happening in the world or what might happen to this other person, or what, you know, it's more that kind of anxiety of like self, right? Like, what have I done or not done? Where am I with this thing? You know, have I not got far enough with this thing? So it's quite kind of self-linked anxiety. So for that reason, this kind of deep connection with yourself is going to be really useful in moving away from it. Okay, and then the last thing that I'm going to talk about here, and this is by no means an exhaustive list, but the last one I'm going to talk about is dreaming, right? By which I mean dreaming about the future. So this is almost the opposite, right? I would probably try doing all the other things first, because this is quite a difficult switch to make directly from feeling a lot of New Year's anxiety to do kind of pleasant New Year's, daydreaming about the new year. It's quite a jump. So maybe do some of the other things first. But this is such a powerful one, because it's almost like your brain can't quite do both at once, right? Your brain isn't capable of being very anxious and pleasantly daydreaming about the future in a really kind of vivid, experienced way, right? So if I am sort of daydreaming about, you know, like a work project I'd love to set up and be involved with in a year's time, right? If I'm really daydreaming of that, and I can see the people, or I can hear what's going on, and I can feel the feelings I'm feeling, and I can feel textures, or I can feel the floor I'm standing on beneath my feet, or I can feel the chair I'm sitting in. If it's very vivid to that extent and has lots of detailed sensory stuff in it, and it's all positive stuff that I love, right? It's enjoyable, compelling, then I'm not going to simultaneously be really anxious about something, because you actually really can't do both at once, right? I mean, I might go back and forth, but I can't literally at the same time do both. So this then is so powerful for any kind of anxiety, to shift yourself into, you know, positively imagining the future. And that could be tomorrow. You could imagine something lovely about tomorrow, but often what's more powerful is, you know, 1 year, 5 years, 10 years, right? Because that allows more time to have changed stuff. So it can be more exciting. It can be like, oh, you know, imagine what I could create in 5 years. And you can include kind of the, you know, the big dreams you have for your life, whatever those are for you. And it can be really different for different people. And you might think, well, I don't want to change anything about my life. Thanks. But then if that was the case, you probably wouldn't even have been watching this video, because you probably wouldn't have that kind of New Year's anxiety, right? Where you're like, oh, I haven't got far enough with this, or I haven't done as much as I want to do here. So however, even if that was the case, even if you were completely satisfied with your life now, it's still really good, because of course, I suppose it might be, you might be satisfied with what's going on in your life and just very dissatisfied with where your mental health is, for example. That could be a possibility. In which case, you could imagine that one thing changing, right? Imagine everything being the same in 5 years and your mental health being excellent, right? Really robust mental health, where, yeah, of course you get worried now and then, or you get low now and then, like anyone would, but you've got really great tools for lifting yourself up again. You feel really in tune with yourself. You feel like you can authentically be yourself. You feel kind of relatively calm, confident, positive, like most of the time. Sure, not all of the time, right? It's an impossible thing anyway, and probably wouldn't be a good idea. But most of the time you're feeling pretty good. So kind of imagine that. And it might not look any different from the outside, but it's going to feel really different, right? And you might be noticing things that you're not noticing now. You might be making different kinds of plans. It's always really going to be effective, this, right? To imagine a detailed way the future, and to just really enjoy that. Yeah, again, to put yourself into a relaxed state, use breathing. Again, you could look at my hypnosis guide. It's orlakirby.com/learn to meditate. Put yourself into a really relaxed, beautiful state, and then allow yourself to daydream in this way. Okay, so those are my ideas then for how to move yourself away from New Year's type anxiety. I hope you find this really helpful. And go and have a look at all the other videos on this channel. Okay, bye.